Tommy Neyland, Don Bosco Prep graduate from the class of 1993. All these years later, this is now my third year as the head of enrollment, and it's an honor to work with all of you. First and foremost, very big congratulations to everybody for being accepted to the Don Bosco Prep class of 2029. Really excited to have you all. We know that this is a decision-making process, and there's a lot to learn and continue to discern with the process. And we feel like we have an incredibly successful and strong learning needs program. And my colleagues, Mr. Delucci and Mrs. Murray, are obviously two of the biggest parts of that. So we're very excited to have them present tonight. I have not much else to say tonight, but I am here for you every step of the way for anything you need. Any questions related to enrollment or otherwise, just email admissions@donboscoprep.org. You probably all noticed we're happy and quick to help. So please do that if you need us. And on that note, I will now turn it over to who's going first? Tom?
Me.
All right, Mr. Delucci, take it away.
All right, thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Tom Delucci. I may have had a conversation with many of you already during the past months, probably a phone conversation or an in-person meeting to talk about our program. So the purpose of this meeting tonight is to provide you with some information specifically about the Learning Needs Program and the supports that are available. So as Tommy just mentioned, with me is Mrs. Linda Murray, and Mrs. Murray is one of our two resource room teachers who are part of the Learning Needs Program. So what we would like to do tonight is to give you some general information about the program, about the resources and the support that is available through the Learning Needs Program. And then following that, some specific information about how students would access help and academic support as a student at Don Bosco. So again, some of this may be redundant if we've had a conversation. I apologize for that. But again, I just want to go over with you what our roles would be and what the program will offer to your son in terms of academic support as a student at Don Bosco. I am the director of the Learning Needs Program, so I would be coordinating the resources and services that we provide through the resource rooms, as well as the outside support that comes to us from Bergen County Special Services. Mrs. Murray specifically is working in one of those two resource rooms, generally with our juniors and seniors. We have a second resource room for the freshmen and sophomores. So what does it look like if your son is coming to us with a 504 plan or an IEP or a service plan if he's coming from a non-public school? As a student here, the transition should be seamless. We've asked you already to provide us with a copy of a 504 or a service plan IEP if that's what your son has. So from the beginning, I just want to mention to you that in the course of this year, as in the remaining months of the school year, if there's any updates to that plan, there might be an annual review or a reevaluation. If you have updated documentation, I ask you to please forward that to me. It could be sent directly to me through our school email, and we'll add that to the file. Students who have a service plan or an IEP will work with Bergen County Special Services as a student at Bosco. So an IEP becomes a service plan in a non-public school. It's similar, but not quite the same, but the services are maintained through Bergen County Special Services, meaning that going forward, annual reviews, reevaluations are done by the child study team from Bergen County Special Services. If your son has a 504 plan, again, that will be honored. The accommodations will continue to be provided. We'll update that during your time at Bosco. Bergen County Special Services will provide a number of additional supports for your students. In the next few months, probably the end of April or at the latest early May, the students who currently have an IEP or a service plan will be contacted by me with some forms that need to be completed. Those forms are completed and signed, returned to me. Then they will be forwarded along with a copy of the service plan you forwarded to us already to Bergen County Special Services early summer, so that during the summer months, that documentation and those forms are being processed. From day one of next year's academic year, the accommodations are available to your son. The form is called a 407 form. If some of your sons are currently in a non-public school that is serviced by Bergen County Special Services, you're probably familiar with that form. It's a request for services. That needs to be completed and signed. The second form is a request to use federal IDEA funds to provide supplemental support and instruction for the students. So I'll forward those two forms to you. If you get them back to me, again, they're collated along with the forms for our current students. And then with copies of your service plans, those will be forwarded early summer to Bergen County to begin the process. Next year, Bergen County would reach out to you for either an annual review, or if your son is scheduled for a reevaluation, that will be scheduled with the child study team. Those reevaluations are all done in school. So the planning meeting will be scheduled. Your son will be tested by the two people from the child study team on 2 separate days. And that would be followed by a final meeting, which updates his current academic plan. In addition to providing those services, Bergen County Special Services provides some additional supports. If your son is a New Jersey resident, he would be entitled to 1 period of supplemental instruction per week through Bergen County Special Services. Again, this is only for students who have a IEP or service plan, and it is restricted to New Jersey students. So New York students are not entitled to that because the funds for that are coming from the state of New Jersey. However, that second form that I just mentioned before that requests use of federal IDEA funds opens the door to other supports for all of our students, both New York and New Jersey. With that funding comes a learning consultant who is in the building each week. That person will work with our students to help them with organization, time management, study strategies, study skills, talk about their academic progress. We also have a math specialist who comes. She's there 1.5 days each week. And we also have a reading specialist. So if your student might be struggling in math and can use some extra support, he can get that support through either that supplemental instructor from Bergen County or the math specialist, or both. If your student is struggling perhaps with reading and reading comprehension, time working with that reading specialist would be provided at once a week also. And she has a background in reading strategies. She's worked with dyslexic students. So she has a strong foundation there and can provide some support to help build your son's reading skills. Those 3 people are coming again through Bergen County each day of the week. There is literally 1 or more people who are coming in to provide additional support for our students. So that you're aware, again, as a non-public school, obviously we don't have the same resources or the ability to provide what some public schools can provide. However, based upon what I just shared with you, as a non-public school, we have a very strong program. Those people who are coming from outside, the child study team, plus our 2 resource room and resource room teachers, provide a significant amount of support for students. One thing that your son will hear from us from the get-go is the importance of self-advocacy. And what we want to see is that the students are coming in and throughout the high school years are growing in independence as well as in self-advocacy. What I often will say to the guys is, if you learn how to self-advocate as a student here, you'll be a step ahead of a lot of other students in college. It's an important life skill, but we believe it is really fundamental to the success of the students in our program. And I can happily tell you that that is an area where many of the boys in the Learning Needs program grow significantly throughout the 4 years of their high school. Learning how to reach out and take advantage of those accommodations and supports that I'm talking about is crucial. With that also, I would just want to say this, coupled with the idea of self-advocacy and encouraging the students to continually grow as independent students. My approach that I share with them in terms of these accommodations is this, and I want to share that with you as parents. I hope that the guys will look at these accommodations, whatever they may be, extra time for tests, preferential seating, the access to notes, these people that I'm talking about that provide supplemental help. My words to the guys is, these are not your crutches. They're not excuses. These are your tools. And I want them to think of these as tools that will help them to become more effective and more efficient students. The image that I often use with them is, if you want to put a nail in a wall, you can bang it in with your hand or you can use a hammer. Either way, you'll get the nail in the wall. One way is going to take you longer and it's going to be a lot more painful. But if you think of these accommodations and these resources as tools in your toolbox and have that positive approach to these, they're not going to be a crutch or an excuse. As a tool, you'll use them to help you to grow and to develop and to mature as students and to become more self-sufficient and more self-advocating, a more effective and efficient student. So that's kind of the mindset that I would like to share with you tonight, the mindset that we hope we can instill in the students. Wherever they are right now, whatever their experience as a student with some kind of learning plan, and I know that in some cases it isn't always the most positive, but whatever the past, this is a great opportunity for a new beginning. And the 4 years ahead for them, if they work with us and meet us halfway and accept that kind of mindset of tools, I think you'll see some tremendous growth in them over the next few years. Again, this program has grown tremendously throughout the years. Mrs. Murray has been along this road with me and can attest to that too. Maybe 10 years ago, we were 60, 70, 80 students in learning needs. Right now, as of today, there are 180 students. It's grown tremendously, not by design, but I think it's grown because it has worked and it has helped so many kids.
Oh my God.
The best way that the word gets out there is the word of mouth from people who have been a part of this program, who have seen how it's helped their students. So I offer that to you too, because I'm sure there's some apprehension on your part. Again, starting high school is a huge transition for any one of these students. Students who are coming in with learning differences, it could be more challenging, but I just offer to you the promise that
Where'd you put the garbage?
this has worked for many kids.
For home to eat it. No,
And I've seen such significant growth in so many of the guys throughout the years that they can go far beyond where they think they can go and where they are when they walk in as freshmen. And if you can trust that with these resources and the support, and I think support and genuine caring on the part of the many people that are working with your students is really at the heart of what we're doing. So there is a lot that will be available to them. Just kind of to backtrack a little bit, I explained some of those external people that are coming in. Mrs. Murray and Miss Judge, who is in the other resource room, are also there to support and provide another layer of support. Maybe Linda, if you'd like to talk a little bit about what you do in the resource room and the ways that the students find support there would be helpful.
Yes, I'm just typing an answer to somebody. Somebody asked, what's the size of the supplemental period typically, and are they focused on a particular subject? So our math specialist focuses on math, the reading specialist focuses on reading, and then we have another supplemental instructor who comes from Bergen County for our New Jersey boys, and he can do math, science, English. He can really do any subject, maybe not theology, but he can do pretty much every other subject. So it's good, you know, that the boys can focus. In terms of the resource room, not every student who has a learning plan has resource room. The boys who have resource room have a language-based disability. And in our school, we don't have time during the school day for everything. So the way that resource room works is if your son has a language-based disability, he will not take a foreign language and he will come to the resource room during that period. Resource room is every day. In the resource room, many things happen. Resource room class size is no more than 6 because quite frankly, we can't fit more than 6 desks in the room at a time. So they're very small, a lot of one-to-one instruction. We focus on upcoming assignments. We focus on preparing the boys for the quizzes and tests that they have. So if a teacher puts up a Kahoot, we will do that with them. If the boys get study guides, which they do, our boys, most of them have study guides as part of their accommodations. So we will review the study guides with them before the tests. We work on projects with them, long-term projects. We help to chunk the work so that they don't get overwhelmed and they are able to finish the work on time. We work, if they have group work to do, we'll do group work. I also teach British literature. Miss Judge, the resource teacher that your boys would have, teaches Comp and Lit, which is one of the freshmen, it's the freshman literature class. So we also do supplemental instruction for our classes in our resource rooms. The rooms, another thing that we focus on are study skills for the boys and time management, which is huge. And that's one thing that we try to help the boys develop, that time management skill, because once you get to college, that's a really useful tool to have. So we do it in various ways. I send a note home every Friday. I look through the list of all of the boys I have in resource room. I look through all of their classes, and I put a list together of all of their upcoming assignments. So they know the Friday before the upcoming week what's coming, and they can then figure out when they're going to fit their assignments in, because as I'm sure with many of your boys, the boys that I have athletic commitments. They have other activities that they do, whether it be, you know, music or drama or whatever they do, robotics. So it's hard to fit everything in, and that list helps them to kind of organize themselves. And I think they find it useful. I've gotten some nice comments from parents who said that it was helpful for them. If the boys are struggling with time management, you know, we can print out a weekly planner for them and put, you know, block out all of the commitments they have during the week, including, you know, their school time, their practice time, you know, any other things that they do with your family, block out time for, you know, meals and a little R&R. And then they see what's left and they can fit in and they can plug in whatever they need to do that week. And that's helpful for them as well. you know, we've, as Mr. Delucci said, we've had some really great successes with our kids, and it's just great to see the kids blossom from freshman year to junior or senior year, excuse me. This is my 21st year, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I would love to work with your boys, and I look forward to working with your boys. Even though I work with juniors and seniors, they are always welcome to come to me. I'm in school by 6:30 in the morning. They can always come before school if they have questions or they just want a quiet place to do some work. And I do have boys that do that. I have 2 boys in anatomy who come up fairly regularly to you know, study or just kind of go through things together, and it's helpful. And then all of the teachers by contract are mandated to be in school for half an hour after school. So your boys have access to their teachers for a half hour every day after school to go for extra help. And many teachers stay later than that. The boys also have access to several honor societies. We have a math honor society, English honor society, Spanish, I believe we have Italian. And then the boys also have access to our National Honor Society students. And those boys can help with tutoring. How that works is if you believe your son needs a National Honor Society tutor, he can speak to his counselor, and that counselor will pair him with a student. And sometimes it's that, you know, peer-to-peer tutoring that really seems to work, because the boy who your son will be paired with has had that class in the not too distant past, and sometimes the guys build up a rapport, and it's really helpful, and they build those relationships, which are so helpful. There's a question here. Do kids who have accommodations on the basis of an ADHD diagnosis typically have access to that resource room? Every student in the learning needs program has access to the resource room before school and after school every day. If your son has a language-based disability, then Mr. Delucci would speak with you about perhaps having him have a resource period every day. But every student has access to the rooms before and after school. We're there. If you have any questions about resource room, please just type them. I have the chat up, and I'd be happy to answer them. But I think, hang on. Do you need to have do you need to have an IEP coming into the school, or can they be evaluated when they are at your school? I'm going to throw that one back to Mr. Delucci.
Yeah, good question. Yes, there are students who come to us without a service plan for whatever reason. Sometimes kids fall through the cracks and they get to high school. You know, for example, I'm working with a student right now who is a good example of that. He did struggle for many years through school with reading, but it was never something that his school pursued or picked up on. So yes, so if a student is seen maybe as by the teachers as struggling and refer that student, or the parent has a concern, we can submit the request to Bergen County Special Services for an initial evaluation. And again, that is done by the child study team from Bergen County, who we would be working with. I just want to go back for a second also to clarify something. I've been talking a lot about these resources, you know, the learning consultant, math specialist, the reading specialist, and so on, and the supplemental. Just to clarify, in order to access those supports, a student would have to have a service plan. So students who have a 504, and many times the 504 is for things like ADHD, some health-related issues. A 504 student does not have access to those people. And the reason for it is by law, we're not permitted to access those. So you have to be a student with a classified learning disability in order to access that. The students with a 504, however, again, as Mrs. Murray just talked about, can access the support within the school in the resource rooms with the teachers and with those peer tutoring opportunities. And with the peer tutoring also, I just wanted to throw something out. One thing good that came out of COVID was the greater use of Zoom. Years ago, if you were paired with a tutor, you would schedule a time after school to meet. The good thing with Zoom is that opens up the possibility to meet with a tutor at other times. So it just does give a lot more flexibility. Sometimes the NHS tutors and the students will meet by Zoom in the evenings or even on the weekends. So that's a very positive thing. It just allows the students more access to that support. And many guys do work after, later in the evenings, working together to prep for tests and so on. So that's something else to keep in mind.
One thing to think about as well, and just kind of one thing that I say to the boys is we have a lot of boys who are athletes or involved in after school activities, and I tell them that they are students first. So if they're struggling in a class, or if they feel they need extra help, they need to be at that extra help after school, and the teacher will write them a pass, and they can give the pass to the coach. If there's ever an issue with a coach, then your student can certainly come to me or to Mr. Delucci and tell us, and we will speak with administration about that, because the boys are students first, and that's really important for them to know that their academics come first. The other thing I wanted to, is there support inside the classroom throughout the day, or is it only in the resource room? Typically, at the moment, it's in the resource room. In the past, we have had someone push in for math, but I don't believe we have that at the moment.
No.
Okay. Just so you know, for anyone who has submitted a plan for their son, an IEP, an SP, or a 504, in May, I will compile that information and it will be put onto our learning platform, Veracross. So when your teachers get their rosters, when they go into Veracross and they see their rosters, there's a tab that says learning plans. And all of the boys in their classes who have learning plans or IEPs or 504s will be there, and they will be able to access your son's accommodations. They are also required to come up to my room and to sign off on the folder. So they are aware of the accommodations, but they know before your son enters their room that he has accommodations, and they will know what those accommodations are.
So again, kind of to follow with what Mrs. Murray just said, the students in the Learning Needs program are in classes on every academic level at Bosco. We have learning needs students in our AP classes, advanced classes, the honors classes, the college prep classes. We also have a section of college prep called Core. It's for English and math. This would be for students who may be struggling more in those particular subjects. They still follow a college prep curriculum, but by design, the classes are smaller. That allows for more individualized attention and allows more flexibility for the teachers to modify the pace or focus on areas as needed. So again, our students are all mainstream. They're, except for those guys who are in the resource room as language exempt students. They're in all mainstream classes with the teacher. There are no push-in or supplemental teachers in the classrooms. They can access these other people if they have a service plan, the people that I mentioned, or if a 504 student can access additional help in the resource rooms as after school as well. All students, again, have access to teachers after school as well as peer tutoring. Did you have any additional questions there, Mrs. Murray?
There is one. Would you talk a bit about how you address executive function skills, especially for incoming freshmen, e.g. locker and work organization planning, etc.? Well, we don't have lockers. The boys have iPads, and so they don't carry around textbooks. So whatever they have, they pretty much keep on their person. In terms of work organization, as I mentioned before, you know, when the boys come into the resource room every day, we'll go over what they currently have, what's coming up, and I have access to their grades and their assignments, so I can see if maybe they've fallen behind a bit in a class, and I can help them to catch up. We can decide if we need to talk to the teacher. if, to see if that teacher will allow the late work to be handed in. Again, I send a note home every Friday with all of the upcoming assignments. That goes to everyone in the Learning Needs program, all the juniors and seniors. And I always tell the boys to make sure that they check Canvas as well, which is our platform for our teachers in case assignments are added over the weekend. And it's a learning curve when the boys come in, because they may not have had to work in, a platform like this before. And they have 7 subjects, so it's a lot. And we do try to work with them.
And again, the learning consultant that is with us each week that I mentioned before, that's something that she would focus on too with the students that she works with.
Okay. And Mr. Delucci, there's a question. Does foreign language exemption need to be noted in the IEP prior to starting?
Yeah, good. That's a great question. Yes. We don't put a student in the resource room unless they explicitly have the foreign language exemption in their service plan. And the reason for that also is to cover them on the other end of high school, as far as college is concerned and college acceptance. And that's a concern sometimes that people have. Generally, as long as it's in the plan, colleges will honor it. Occasionally, I do get questioned why a student hasn't had a language. All I need to do then is just explain to them that the student has the language exemption in their service plan, and in place of that, they have a daily resource room period, and then the college is fine with that. But because the colleges see our student profile, they know that a Bosco student would be required to take 3 years of language. So I make sure that it is explicitly in the plan. And again, as Mrs. Murray said earlier, it would be for kids who are dealing with language-based significant learning differences. Most of the guys in the program are taking a foreign language.
And Mr. Delucci, should we mention some of those Florida schools?
Yeah. To be honest with you, I mean, we really never had a problem until 2 years ago, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
The University of Tampa decided that they were going to make sure that you have a foreign language. That was, so far, is really the only school that is insisting that a student have the language. Most of the others, again, as I've said, I mean, from any of the schools that we deal with. I just this year recently, about a week ago, I had a call from University of Delaware, and they were questioning why the language wasn't on the student's transcript who was applying. I just explained to them what I just shared with you. And, that person then was going to share it with the admissions team. So it's a matter of clarifying. But right now, Tampa is the only school that is insisting.
And they took sign language as
Yes.
language, right?
Yes. So the student that was interested in Tampa took a sign language course over the summer going into senior year, and that was accepted.
And he was accepted to the school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in general, again, as long as it's explicitly in the plan, and we don't just open it up to everybody, again, it needs to be a language-based disability.
I don't see any more questions.
Okay. One thing I would just add again, I hope it was clear what I was covering here, that a lot of those people, the supplemental instructors and so on, are coming. The guys who have a service plan have access to those. By law, the 504 students cannot access that math reading specialist and so on, but they do have the resource room, the teacher, and peer supports. The typical accommodations that are in both the 504s and the service plans are accommodations that would be provided at the school. The extra time for tests, time and a half, preferential seating, access to notes, use of a calculator if that's in the plan, study guides and so on, are all things that could be and would be provided to the students. Again, I just ask you to understand, many times there are things put into service plans as kids are in the lower grades that may not be age appropriate for high school. And the understanding too is hopefully that as the guys are not needing some of those things as they're growing older, and so everything that may be currently in a service plan may not be available on our level, but I hope that you see, and from what was said here, that as a non-public school, there is a significant amount of support that is provided through our program. I know that surprises a lot of people. You know, I have conversations with parents, maybe some of you, and when you hear all the things that we're talking about here, are very surprised that there is a lot.
Yep.
So the help is there if the students, again, meet us halfway. Use these things as tools, as I talked about before, and are willing to really learn to self-advocate and reach out and use these. It's so important that they feel confident enough in themselves to realize, okay, I need the help, and this help is being offered. I'm going to gladly reach out and use it. The one other thing that I would add before we conclude is everyone was asked as part of the application process to provide a copy of a 504 or the learning plan or IEP. Again, if there are any changes in the coming months, if you have an annual review coming up or a reeval, any new documentation, could you please forward that to me by email? We'll add that to the file. And again, as I explained at the beginning, that documentation, along with those forms that I mentioned, will be passed on to Bergen County Special Services early summer to make sure that everything is in order and we're ready to go for the start of the new year.
Mr. Delucci, there were just a couple more questions.
Sure.
So are you saying students with ADHD are not eligible for supplemental instruction or and currently has an IEP and one of the accommodations is supplemental instruction from Bergen County? So would that be honored? Yes, it would be. If
Yes.
your student has an IEP and it's from Bergen County and you are a New Jersey resident, he is eligible for all of the supplemental instruction. And then does access to study guides and notes need to be noted in the plan to be implemented at Bosco to be available to a student with a service plan? Yes, study guides and notes should be noted in the plan. And then again, that information goes to the teachers before the start of the school year. And Mr. Delucci, there's one for you. Can you talk some more on what are the limited resources as a New York resident?
Well, a New York resident with a service plan or an IEP would have, again, Bergen County Special Services will handle the eligibility piece, meaning the annual reviews, the reevaluations. If a student is also eligible for speech, a New York or New Jersey student would have that. Any of those additional people that I mentioned before, the learning consultant, the math specialist, the reading specialist, are available to any student with a service plan, New York or New Jersey. The only thing that a New York student cannot access is that one period a week of supplemental instruction through Bergen County Special Services. The reason again for that is the funding for that comes from the state of New Jersey. That the reading specialist, the math specialist, the learning consultant, that is funded by IDEA or federal money. So that money can be used for both New York and New Jersey. So again, the only thing that a New Yorker could not get as long as he has a service plan is the period of supplemental with Bergen County because he is out of state. So the question on the ADHD, just to clarify that, I mentioned that before because many times students with ADHD have a 504. But if a student with ADHD has a service plan, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the reason for his eligibility. As long as he has a service plan or an IEP classified, he has access to these things that we're talking about. Okay, so it's not the ADHD diagnosis. It's whether or not he has a service plan or a 504. The 504 is going to be more limited. You'll get accommodations, but you don't get the additional academic support with the 504.
Those are all the questions.
Okay. Again, if anyone has any questions going forward, feel free to give me a call or send me an email, in the coming months. And just again, a final reminder, what I mentioned at the beginning, by late April or early May, those of you who have a IEP or service plan, I will contact you about those 2 forms that I mentioned. Get them to you for your completion and your signature. Those I need so that they could be submitted to Bergen County. Unfortunately, they usually don't become available until a little later in the spring. Otherwise, as soon as I get them, I'll certainly be forwarding them to everyone. So that's the next thing on your part. The 2 things. 1, watch for those forms. And secondly, if there are any updated documents, just forward that to me so we can keep the files updated. So again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And if you have questions going forward, always feel free to shoot an email to myself or to Mrs. Murray. Okay.
Thanks so much, everybody. We have more Zooms next week as a reminder, and a big reminder on Accepted Students Night next Thursday night. That's when we say we're a homeschool parish playground, Accepted Students Night is the full playground effect for the boys. It's really a can't miss. It's a lot of fun, and you might have seen on the email. You're all invited for a relaxing cup of coffee, hot chocolate, cookie kind of mingling session in Savio Cafeteria across the quad while the young men are having fun. So keep an eye out for more emails from us, more reminders, and see you next week.